I'm outside the Old Bailey with Mr. Jerrard Batten, the former leader of UKIP. Mr. Batten, thanks for being with me today.
You're welcome, and it's pleased to be able to speak to you. Well, what can I say? I keep thinking I can't be surprised by what happens in this country, and then we get another big surprise. I followed this case. I was here at the last hearing in the Old Bailey when Tommy gave a submission to the judge where it was obvious that no offence had been committed. The judge then obviously didn't want to deal with the case because he knew there was no case to answer, so he put it upstairs to the Attorney General, the government's pet lawyer. And several months later we come back on trumped-up charges of contempt of court. And what's he been convicted of today? Essentially, because outside, as the convicts were going back into court, he said to them, "How do you feel about the verdict?" And that is what he's been convicted on. It's unbelievable, but unfortunately not unbelievable. We had a trumped-up charge and we've had a political verdict. I'm so sorry to be standing outside the principal court of the country, the Old Bailey, and having to say now that we have a corrupt legal system.
When you were standing before the European elections, you stood up and very defiantly supported Tommy Robinson, even then as the leader of a party, and it takes a level of fearlessness for that, and some would say insanity given the media climate, but in all seriousness on this, where did you get the fortitude to stand up for that, knowing that it would put the media against you, it would put the political elites against you, even more than they were already?
Some might say it's stupidity. You know, I have lived a privileged life. During my lifetime, I've never had to go to war. I've earned a good living. Standard of living have risen. I've had a comfortable life built on what my father's generation did in the Second World War and what generations of Englishmen and women have done in the previous hundreds of years. Defended this country and worked to keep it free and independent. So what courage does it take to stand up and defend a man who has stood up and tried to defend our country against one of the greatest threats that faces Western civilization now, which is literalist, fundamentalist, extremist Islam, the ideology of Islam. My God, if I haven't got the guts to stand up and just speak and defend somebody like that and speak out against this evil, then I don't deserve to live in a free country. And I think, who was it, one of your American founders of the Constitution said, you know, people who want security but are not prepared to defend it don't deserve it.
Let's talk then about the forecast of the country here. Do you believe that this will serve to further cement the lack of free speech in the UK, or do you think this could actually have a galvanizing effect, what happened to Tommy, and really start moving the pendulum the other way perhaps?
I think you're Canadian, aren't you?
Yes, but it's okay, I know the quote, it's a very good one.
Stuck your accent, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going to happen, because now you can be convicted for reading what Winston Churchill said about Islam in 1898, when he said, he wrote a foreword to a book that he'd written, and he said, "Islam in a man is as dangerous as rabies in a dog." So if you quote that in public, you can be found guilty of hate speech or some other trumped-up charge, I don't know. You are not allowed now to have freedom of opinion about things. I'm not talking about inciting hatred or inciting violence or whatever against individual people. I'm talking about the ability to address ideas and ideologies. You can now be convicted of crimes for doing that. We're living in a very, very dangerous place now in our country. And how do I think this verdict is going to affect free speech? Well, for one thing, all the lying smear merchants of the mainstream media won't now be able to go up to people going into court and saying, "How do you feel about the verdict?" Will they? So they can't do their job. Except, of course, they'll be exempt, because it doesn't apply to them. It only applies to people like Tommy Robinson and people like who the establishment and the media don't like. I think what's happened here today is sickening. And what the aftermath of this will be sickening, because you'll see the political establishment saying he's a convict, with all the people that support him are thugs, and you will have that message amplified and repeated over and over again by our rotten, lying, smear merchant mainstream media of the BBC and Sky and Channel 4. We are sleepwalking in this country towards a police state, a dictatorship, a gulag of the mind, where you're not allowed to speak your opinions. And that's very dangerous.
Thank you for speaking yours.